I gotta go get the switch
The switch.
and hit the light switch too, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, no, leave that. Okay. This discussion will come from a perspective of being an intelligence assessment, okay? Sort of like a threat assessment. Because I used to be an intelligence analyst. I taught Soviet military doctrine, and then I did in the Balkans for 4 years counterterrorism and counter-mafia operations, where we had to do network analysis. So this talk, I want to bring you through the organizational links of some key organizations and how various movements link up together, but more importantly, how the flow of information goes through all these movements, allowing them to share the same perspective. Somebody has to get the sharing the same perspective.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know I had to stay up here.
Then I want to take you through what fourth generation warfare is, not yet. What fourth generation warfare is, why that's the underlying strategy of the Christian right that goes through all of the movements on the right wing, what Dominionism is, and then Seven Mountains Doctrine, and then some conclusions. This presentation will probably challenge some of your beliefs or some of your ideas about how you conceptualize a Christian right. Next. Okay, now the key organization was the Free Congress Foundation. It was founded by the late Paul Weyrich. He employed in the 1980s a man named William S. Lind. He was a military strategist. He worked with the U.S. Marine Corps. He worked at a very high level with various commandants of the Marine Corps. But he also cooperated and collaborated with the late Colonel John Boyd, who is America's top strategist in history. The New York Times, Washington Post, you will not find a disparaging word about the late Colonel John Boyd. He was the best we ever produced. And so Lynn borrowed heavily from John Boyd. Now, back in 1973, when this basically all begins, Paul Weyrich is one of the four architects of the Christian right. And he says very early on that this is not about electing Republicans. This is about overthrowing the basic order of society and government. They do not hide their strategy. They don't hide their objectives. Next. Now, here's the Free Congress Foundation. And up until like the 1990s and then early 2000s. The Free Congress Foundation was known for a couple of things. One, Paul Weyrich had this Arlington group. It brought together hundreds of Christian right groups, parachurch groups, to conduct various operations like stopping gays from working, stopping gay marriage, stopping abortion, stopping reproductive rights, whatever it was. He would bring these groups together. That was how they operationalized their strategy. But it was also known for, because he had William S. Lind there, Lind was the one who came up with the idea of delegitimizing liberalism by saying that liberals were really cultural Marxists and that they hated Western society, and particularly they hated American society. And so he formulated that, and it went to the anti-immigration movement run by John Tanton. It went to the Council for Conservative Citizens, and as we'll see, that spreads it out into the entire right wing of what you would call the neo-Nazis, the Ku Klux Klan, the neoconservative movement, the alt-right now today. And then, of course, Lind would go to talk to the Institute for Historical Review, run by Willis Carto, and Willis Carto was the #1 anti-Semite in America. So, even though Lind may or may not be an anti-Semite, probably not, they definitely cooperated with all these elements. And they spread their ideas through the entire right wing. Next. And as you can see, John Tanton, his spread went to the House Immigration Reform Caucus. It went to the Declaration Alliance. Now, in the 2005 era to 2009, they ran the Minutemen, the border militia, the major border militia in the United States. They ran that, and John Tanton was influencing that. Then you had Secure Borders Coalition and the Families First on Immigration. That was the first attempt of the Christian right to get into anti-immigration work. Up until that time, and not everybody on the Christian right bought into this, but up until that time, the Christian right had this massive outreach to Hispanics. They were running Spanish language websites and Spanish language broadcasts, and this is the first break in the Christian right where some of the groups, the hardline groups, went for anti-immigration. And then John Tanton, he networked with the Council of Conservative Citizens, American Renaissance, which is run by Jared Taylor. That holds a yearly confab. Stormfront shows up, white supremacists show up, Ku Klux Klan show up, Republicans show up, and they talk about white supremacy and what they want to do. So these ideas of white nationalism, white genocide, stopping birthright citizenship, they percolate through the entire movement.
Can you talk on this, stopping the birthright citizenship?
They want to end birthright citizenship. Under the 14th Amendment, the U.S. Constitution, if you're born in America and you were not subject to a foreign power, like a diplomat, you're born here, you're a citizen, automatic. We don't have any blood, we don't have any soil, born here, citizen, end of story. They want to end all that. That will end up challenging everybody's citizenship. Everybody's citizenship. And they made an example of Barack Obama. Now, if you can challenge Barack Obama's citizenship, they can challenge yours. Next. Okay. Now, the Christian right's organized in a way that they have the Council for National Policy. It's a secretive group, but it's not a secret group. But they just don't advertise what the heck they do. What they do is they bring in representatives of billionaires, like the Koch brothers have a representative on the executive council or executive committee of the Council for National Policy. These guys are like 15 people. They are the ones that formulate their overall strategy. What are they trying to achieve? How are they going to do it? They start marrying up parachurch organizations with funders, local organizations, and then they operate. So, the Conservative Action Project is run by a guy named Ed Meese. You know who he is? Former Attorney General for Ronald Reagan. He is the key to linking at the elite level. He goes to the Koch brothers conflabs. He coordinates with C Street. So he is at the elite level. He brings together funders and all these operations. The Conservative Action Project, of course, consists of a number of other parachurch organizations. But they influence the Tea Party movement. They influence the Freedom Federation, which has the Americans for Prosperity, the other Koch vehicle.
Oh, yeah.
They have the Value Voter Summit. If you want to be a pretend GOP presidential candidate, you have to go to the Value Voter Summits and kiss the ring. And then the Conservative Action Project was part of both of those anti-immigration things that the Christian right was in. Thanks. Okay, now, this organization, I think, still exists. It is known, but secretive again. It has links, when you look at all the people, it has links to Silicon Valley, the Peter Thiels and other people like that. It has links to all the movements, Grover Norquist. And it basically, as far as my view is, it is the secret operational strategic planning cell. They coordinate everything under the radar. And you can see one person that was in the vanguard, Kellyanne Conway. She's in the Trump administration. Stephen Bannon was in the Council for National Policy. He's in the Trump, or was in the Trump administration. So you can see that their reach is they can coordinate different segments, different operations, multiple operations. Okay. Again, now, Paul Weyrich employed William S. Lind. William S. Lind is the originator of fourth generation warfare strategy. He was the first one to write about it. Paul Weyrich in 1981, this is years before Lind's first article, he is already talking about war at the level of moral conflict. This is a war of ideas, it's a war about our way of life. This fits in with the audience that he's talking to. He's talking to evangelical Christians, or conservative evangelical Christians, who are into this apocalyptic end times mentality. And he's telling them, you have to get involved in politics because we are fighting for our way of life. Okay? Next.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you say fourth generation, is it like the United States is 240
Okay.
years old and it's sixth generation, four generations?
No. Okay, so there are 3 other generations of war, and I skipped through it.
Yeah.
But basically, you go from the musket and line to up to maneuver. Okay, maneuvers like World War II, and so these are long generations. And so Linda's saying, okay, look, there are elements of the second and third generation that move into the fourth generation. You're still going to have maneuver, you're still going to have attrition, etc. But this fourth generation is a completely new, revolutionary way of conducting warfare and conflict.
Okay.
So, to rip out the part that's significant here is the goal is to collapse the enemy inside. It's not necessarily to physically annihilate the opponent as much as it is to make the enemy give up, to collapse their will to resist. Therefore, what he says is that psychological operations, very sophisticated psychological operations that manipulate the media, which means manipulate reality, which means manipulate epistemology of how you know things, this is going to be the most important element in the fight. How you perceive and what you perceive is really going to drive this conflict. Next. So, that first article in 1989 was in the U.S. Marine Corps Gazette. This is the second article, 1994, 5 years later. Same, U.S. Marine Corps Gazette. What is shocking about this article is that writing for a Marine Corps audience in an official U.S. government publication, he identifies cultural Marxists, meaning Democrats, meaning President Clinton, as the enemy, who hate America, who are working to destroy America. They're cultural radicals. They can't stand traditional Western culture. They hate our Judeo-Christian culture. This is in a Marine Corps article.
Oh.
Okay? And this permeates through the
Do
Department
they
of
actually identify Clinton?
No.
No, they just.
But you don't have to be
Okay.
brilliant to figure out that cultural Marxist, he's talking about President Clinton and the Democratic Party.
Us.
Okay, now, the last line in the article is, the next real war is likely to be fought on American soil. Real war is a term of art that comes from Clausewitz. Real war is real war. Okay? So he is not saying, this is not just hot air. Understand, this article was written in 1994. He's already helped, through his other article in 1989, to produce the Patriot Militia. Next article. Okay, 2001, Paul Weyrich has an article written by Eric Hubick, but it's really Paul Weyrich and William Lynn. And this document lays out the case of unremitting hostility to the current American society. It is going to bleed the corrupt culture dry, pick off individuals. It is going to weaken them, destroy them, be destructive, deny the legitimacy of the left, undermine the legitimacy of the regime. This is not about electing Republicans, unless they believe like that. This is a radical, revolutionary movement. They don't hide the fact that they want to destroy things. They don't hide it. And then it calls for superhuman sacrifices in a struggle between good and evil. It's a moral conflict. It is fourth generation warfare. Thanks. Now, we'll just run through these. I don't expect you to read them, but Lynn kept up this barrage of delegitimizing liberalism by calling it cultural Marxism, and it hates everything, and it hates Western society, hates Judeo-Christian culture. Go on.
Next?
Yeah.
Oh,
And, as Lynn goes on, he moves further and further right in his thinking. He is really a white nationalist when you come right down to it. He really is a white nationalist. And, he's arguing that whites are for cultural Marxism, that devils have to be stricken out of society. And he says, we have two cultures now. One, the normal American culture, and then this radical revolutionary culture. And he says, we're headed for another conflict on our own soil. Next. Now, in all these articles, he's also talking about the existential threat that liberals pose to white evangelical conservative Christians. This is an existential cultural threat, it's an existential threat, and it mirrors what happens on the very far right with the alt-right when they're talking about cultural genocide. Okay? So he's in the middle of all these movements, communicating with all these movements. But look, at the end, he doesn't hide what the heck he's talking about. He goes, look, at the end of the day, there's only going to be one ideology. And that's going to be his brand of conservatism, or their brand of conservatism, not really Lynn's, but their brand of conservatism. Okay? This is a war of ideas in which there can only be one winner. This is not compromise. This is not political nuances. This is destruction. Now, we get to John Boyd. Now, this is a very simplification of John Boyd, trust me. But what John Boyd was talking about is you have the yin and yang of offense and defense. On the offense, you want to create menace. You want to create uncertainty. You want to create mistrust. On the defense, you want to inoculate your people so that they can overcome menace, overcome uncertainty, and overcome mistrust.